Welcome everybody to episode 16 of Tech Safe, brought to you by our wonderful friends here in Worcester, Massachusetts at WCCA TV. We get together every couple of weeks and talk about the risks that came in with wireless technology and solutions for mitigating those risks. And, you know, as we taught in the earlier episodes, it's not rocket science to fix this issue. All you need to do in the spaces that you have control over is to hardwire your technology. Look at the back or the bottom of your router, and you will find there are Ethernet ports. Just run an Ethernet cable, and then you can get little adapters or dongles to the devices that you use every day. Once you do that, you simply go in and you go into your settings and you turn off all the radio frequency radiation antennas. And not only will you have safer technology, but you will find that your speed is so much better, the reliability is far more improved, and it consumes 10 times less energy than all of this wireless that has been imposed upon us. So we are here to teach you the science, the risks, and the solutions. And today it is my great honor to have with me a musician, a classically trained musician who had an amazing career until she was impacted by wireless radiation. So please welcome Mana Washio from Japan originally, but here now from Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So Mana, please join us and tell us, how did you come to learn that wireless technology has biological harm?
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so honored to be here, and I know you have interviewed all the well-known people like Theodora Scarado of Environmental Health Trust and other people, and I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you so much for including me. Well, I actually became electro-hypersensitive back in 2013, exactly 10 years ago, actually. Overnight, this happened. And it was because smart meters, the digital-faced wireless meters, were installed in our apartment building. And this happened while we were on vacation. So we didn't even consent, to the installation, but it was there when we came home. And immediately after, I started having piercing headache. Couldn't sleep. I felt nauseated all the time, and started having chest pain and all sorts of symptoms. So that was back in 2003. 2013. Yeah, so 10 years ago. And I didn't know what to do at the time. When I went out, and then it came back with vengeance when I came home. So it was really sad. Home is the place, that needs to be safe haven. And, I was actually getting worse every time I came home. So I was thinking about camping or going away, and I know a lot of EHS people deal with that stage at first. And I was very severely disabled, and it was limiting my daily life quite a bit.
Wow.
And so after that,
how did you figure out that it was? Well, first, tell us, what is a smart meter, and how did you figure out that's what triggered your illness?
Well, smart meters actually emit radiation signal. It also creates dirty electricity, but mainly radio frequency signal almost like every minute. It depends on the type of the meter, so sometimes it's different from meter to meter, but so that it could communicate with the headquarters without people coming to read the meters at your home. So they can eliminate the cost of those employees, and they can make more profit.
So this is like an electric meter or a gas or a water meter?
Well, we first had electric meter, but the thing was, I lived in an apartment building where there were at least 4 or 5 units in the building, and my bedroom was surrounded by bank of meters on both sides. And I also have circuit breaker, 2 of them downstairs, and we were living on the 4th floor, so our bedroom was directly above the circuit breakers. I also had Wi-Fi router in my room without knowing its harm at the time.
Okay.
So this was like a perfect storm, and perfect EMS soup, and I had no idea until then, but it definitely triggered.
Yeah, well, that's so important to understand, especially in our own homes where people may not know better, like you and I didn't know until a certain point, that router, all of our wireless devices, our laptops, our tablets, the Roku, the Chromecast, the wireless security systems, all of them are pulsating microwave radiation. And what happened to you very often happens to others, where a new form of electropollution is installed on or near the house, like a smart meter or a cell tower or a 5G small cell. And then we get to a tipping point and our body can no longer clear that on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
So once you started getting sick, how did you find out that this is what it was?
Well, so first of all, a very clear sign was that I was outside right in front of the meters, and then when I was standing in front of the meters, the headache was the absolute worst. And also, I noticed that every time I tried to drive and stop at the traffic light, there is a boxy thing with a smart meter on. And then when I was waiting during the red light, I was having excruciating headache coming from that direction. So I immediately knew what was causing my headache.
Okay.
And up until that kind of meter was installed in my neighborhood, I never had. And also I took a walk, and every time I walked by another meter, I was having headache. So it was pretty obvious at this point.
Wow. So what did you do? Were you able to find a doctor to help you with this?
Well, at first it was very, very hard. So I had to do my own research, although using internet and Wi-Fi was extremely hard. But I actually discovered a book. I think it was, I'm blanking out on the title, but the Electronic Silent Spring or something.
Oh, yes. Electronic Silent Spring by Katie Singer. Yeah.
And I read the stories about people who are getting sensitized or, getting cancer or all kind of health symptoms and nauseated and everything. And I was starting to put pieces together by the time I started reading the book, and then, started doing more research. I started taking herbs and supplements and, tried to change my lifestyle. But the most, important part was, of course, mitigation, because I didn't know how to reduce it at first. But the first thing I got rid of was cordless phone, microwave oven, and also I started being more mindful about how to use internet and also phones. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing, and it was already making a difference. As long as I'm not exposed too much during the day, I was able to function a little bit better. So I have noticed, and also I had to make my body more resilient. That was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And so what were you able to do about the smart meter? Because you said during the day you could control the exposures that were under your control and reduce, the radio frequency. But what happened at night?
Well, at night, so that night, I think one of the things I started using, and I know this is very tricky, so it doesn't work for every situation. It could sometimes make the situation. I was sleeping grounded, and it was helping us very much. And eventually we had to get a canopy that covers the whole bed to shield the RF that's coming from the area. Yeah. But I tried many things.
So I know that at some point you needed to move from that apartment building.
Yes.
Was that related to your electrohypersensitivity?
Yes, definitely, because there was also mold issues in the basement.
Yeah.
And mold exposure makes EHS symptoms worse, and also EMF makes the mold more toxic, and it sort of encourage mold growth. So, so it was, again, perfect soup. I didn't realize that there was a huge cardboard underneath our bedroom that was completely covered with black mold. And once I discovered it, I asked it immediately, I asked the landlord to remove it immediately. And by removing that board, our symptoms got much milder immediately. So, there's these connections. You have to find out what's actually, because it might not be the only thing. Of course, the EMF is a biggie, but it could be combination of few things.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There is a medical association called the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, and these are the doctors who get the conundrum cases like yours, where what they were taught in medical school just isn't cutting it today with all of these environmental exposures that people have, whether it be from the chemicals in the food or other products or the mold or the electromagnetic fields. So if people are finding that their medical team is not prepared to treat them and help them understand what's happening to their bodies, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine is a good place to go. They have a list of doctors in their directory that one can consult with. And now, Mana, you shared with me that you also found, I believe it was with the Electrosensitive Society, a really wonderful 5-page resource that patients can bring to their doctors. Because again, mainstream media is owned by these big corporations that either outright own the media channels, or their advertising revenue is so potent that the stations cannot report on the great biological harm that so many people are suffering from today from wireless technology. So if you would like to do a screen share and kind of walk us through this resource that you found. And again, this is from the Electrosensitive Society, which is run by a wonderful woman up in Canada by the name of Sheena Symington. And Sheena works very closely with Dr. Magda Havas, who's a professor emeritus from Trent University, where she taught electromagnetism for 25 years or so. And Dr. Havas was also the co-chair of the recent EMF, or electromagnetic fields. Those are the pulsations of this radio frequency, the electromagnetic fields. She was the co-chair of that medical conference. So really highly credible information that they have taken the time to pull together for us to help us educate our own healthcare providers. So, Mana, why don't you go ahead and talk us through what you found?
Sure. So electrohypersensitivity, so as well, I actually is a cancer coach, and I coach a lot of cancer patients as well. But not just cancer, but there are so many different symptoms associated with electrohypersensitivity, and people are often link breaks. So there's no uniform symptom, across the board. So for example, in my case, I have headache, nausea, chest pain, heart palpitation, GI issues, and so forth. But other people, it might show up as anxiety and depression, or infertility, or memory loss, or ADD, ADHD, or learning disability, or a host of other things, which are all so common in our world today. So, and you might not have thought about reducing EMF exposure, but there is, a good chance that it could reduce your symptoms, to a certain degree, or even significantly in some cases. You never know until you try.
Yeah, and
right?
we hear that
so
time and again. I do 2 free public education webinars every month with our partners in New Hampshire. And some folks will remember that New Hampshire is the first government in the country to spend a year investigating this issue, and they saw the peer-reviewed published science that show this is a neurotoxin. It causes infertility. It is an immunosuppressant and more, as Mana's been describing. So twice a month, we get together and we offer a free Zoom webinar for anybody in the world to come along and learn with us. You can go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology. That's MA4, safetech.org. And just simply register, and we will spend an hour or 2 with you and help you to connect the dots on the science, the risks, what's happening in public policy and the legal arena. There's a lot of really good things, like, who knew? The FCC has been sued for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm. And the courts told them they need to do better and get public radiation exposure limits in line with the science to protect you and I, our children, the elderly, anybody with an existing health condition, and the environment, because there is study upon study showing this man-made radio frequency, low-level, non-ionizing radiation. It doesn't have to break the atom like X-rays or the sun or gamma rays do to cause harm. We are seeing harm at levels So the FCC allows this much radiation. We are seeing biological effects at hundreds of thousands of times below that. And the more electropollution we layer on in our society, the more people like our guest Mana are going to start getting to that tipping point and getting sick. So please join us at Massachusetts for Safe Technology and bring your questions. We always have a really wonderful Q&A at the end of our presentation. So Mana, do you want to scroll down and just show what some of these symptoms are? And again, these are well documented in the scientific literature.
Yes. And this was talked about in depth in the recent EMF Medical Conference 2021, which I attended, and Cece was one of the speakers as well, and Dr. Magda Havas was a co-chair, as you mentioned. So this has been studied for decades. So not just they are finding it now, but it has been recorded and studied for so many years. Mm-hmm. It's just there was a cover-up, so that's why people didn't hear about this. Yeah. Okay, so and so there are mainly 5 categories: logical and ophthalmologic problems people develop after EMF exposure. So, for example, some people have asthma. My husband is one of them. Other people have eye issues like floaters, cataracts, or blurry eyes, and heart palpitation is another one, shortness of breath, and it can affect low or high blood pressure, and also, blood sugar levels. That's a big one. So think about how many people have diabetes these days, right? So other things is digestive problems, nosebleeds. Yeah, this happens quite a bit. And, really fatigue or great thirst or dehydration, like sensitivity. And insomnia is, of course, a big one. Anxiety, as you can see here, depression, memory loss, the list goes on.
Yeah, and as you said, it's wonderful because once people learn to recognize that the symptoms could be related to their wireless exposures, time and again people say, I didn't want to know about this. I live on my cell phone. I live on my technology. But once they learn the symptoms, they go, what would it hurt to just turn it all off at night and see if there's any change? They might do it for one night and come back and say, oh my gosh, I got the best night's sleep that I've had in years, or my children's behavior issues have calmed way down. So it's not rocket science to fix this, but it is a huge mind shift to think that we've given up our health for the convenience of a mobile device. Mm-hmm. So this is great. Yeah. And then in this document that you have, there's language in there that a doctor or other healthcare practitioner can relate to understand biologically, physiologically, what is actually happening at the cellular level. So this is a wonderful summary.
Yeah, this is very, very well done because, this kind of scientific articles could be much longer in general, but it's very concise. It has only 5 pages, and page 2 is the biological effects of EMF or EMR exposure. And so main thing is, of course, like Cece said, it's neurological and also immune suppressing. So for people like cancer patients who are, facing the, serious issues and they want to boost their immune system, and while they're doing all sorts of treatments and taking herbs and supplements and doing all sorts of things, if they're not mitigating these, then their money might be going down to the drain, mm-hmm. right? So it's really important to look at this aspect as well. It needs to be, holistically thought, like from all different perspectives. But this is one big piece. I coach my cancer patients, in earlier sessions, if possible, because then they can see the difference, right?
Right. One thing that makes this such a difficult conversation to have is it's an invisible toxin. Just like with COVID, we had to learn to take precautions, although we couldn't see this disease. It's there. So at the EMF Medical Conference, they recommended that physicians and other healthcare practitioners invest in a radio frequency detection meter. And I met a doctor here in Massachusetts who had gone to the medical conference, and she got one of these. It's called a Safe and Sound Pro 2 broadband radio frequency detection meter. And she put it on loan in her practice so she can do what she can do to help heal her patients. But if they're returning to a very high electrosmog environment, it's going to undo everything that she's been working with them on. So she actually loans this to her patients for $10, so they'll take it seriously, and says you have 2 hours. Go home, do your scavenger hunt, go scan your home, your car, whatever you spend your time in. Jot down what your readings are and then come back, and we'll teach you how to remediate all of those radio frequency exposures. So this one is in the $400 range. There are others in like the $200 range. If people want to go maybe over to Safe Living Technologies, then you can take a look at what the offerings are. But because with 5G and the Internet of Things, the wireless industry is making a big push to put these radio frequency antennas in everything that you buy these days. From baby diapers, they're putting a little pod on that you can use with your cell phone to tell when the baby has soiled him or herself. And seriously, folks, technology's fun, it's cool, but we really need to start thinking for ourselves about safety. So they anticipate that our homes will have over 200 items in there for the Internet of Things. That's a choice. And once we get informed, who would choose to be radiated from 200 things in our own home? So it comes down to education. And again, come back and join us. Every couple of weeks, we do one of these free public education webinars, and then we send you my slides, and we also give you the recording so that, it's a lot to take on board at once when you're learning this, but you can just learn over and over again. You can join us for any number of these webinars. We have a lot of people who are return attendees because something will stick. They'll go start making changes, and they're like, okay, what's the next step? What can I do now to make my living environment safer? So, Mana, you are, from my understanding, and your husband, classically trained musicians, and you were at the top of your field. Can you tell us how becoming electrosensitive has impacted your life, your livelihood, your relationships, and how you have worked so hard to create a new life in which you can also succeed?
Yep. So I was a performing musician. I was also teaching a lot of students, sending some students to conservatories, and I was a very serious flute teacher. And I performed in many different venues, but I have noticed after I became sensitized, large venues, concert hall venues, became very hard to be. That was one of the hardest places to be for me. To work, because everybody comes with their cell phones, and during intermission everybody's on the cell phone, and so like it was. And even to this day, my husband still performs. He does have some sensitivity, but not as severely as I had, and he still performs, but he's to a certain degree sensitive. But he always reserves a seat that's all the way back in the concert hall, so that nobody else will sit behind me and start using the devices, because I get headache and I cannot think. My memory, start having issues. So there was a major moment, like I decided to change my career. So I was actually playing at a wedding gig, and for whatever reason, the wedding coordinator decided to stand right behind me. And while we were performing, and also it was probably during the ceremony, so our musicians usually talk about how many repeats to take depending on the size of the wedding party and whatnot. So we talked about all the logistics and where to repeat and how many times and where to go after that. I completely lost everything. I couldn't remember anything we talked about. So I made, really, serious mistake, and I couldn't follow up because everybody was playing together, but I wasn't sure where it was.
Oh, my goodness.
That was the moment.
So that makes me think of Dr. Alexia McKnight. She's a veterinarian radiologist. So she's a doctor who works with radiation all the time for her career. And she wound up getting injured by one of these smart meters on her home too. And like you say, with the memory, she got to the point where she would be in her car at a stoplight and she could not remember if green meant stop or go. That's how damaging this microwave radiation is, especially to the brain and the central nervous system. So, so you realized you can't continue to be out there with the public in your highly trained career choice. So what did you do next?
Yeah, so even so the recital, so I started focusing more towards teaching because I could control my environment, teaching environment, as long as I'm teaching at home. But I was also teaching at the music school where there was Wi-Fi router and, sometimes right in front of my room, which was giving me trouble. So like I had to shift away gradually because even having my students perform in the recital, I ask each person to turn off their cell phone because otherwise, sitting there, watching my students perform was hard for me. Think about having chest pain or like, memory issue or brain fog during the performance, right? So, so I actually started thinking about how to is interested in the health and wellness field. So, and also my siblings are medical doctors in Japan. So I was always interested in that field. So I started, educating myself. I was already reading quite a bit in that field, but I decided to be certified as a health coach and also Reiki practitioner. And I started doing those as my profession. So I work mostly from home.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And I know you've helped so many people, and I think you specialize in cancer patients. And others. Can you share with us how folks might be able to get in touch with you if they would like to speak to you further on this or perhaps ask for your services?
Yes, my website is livingwaterreikiwellness.com. My business name is Living Water Reiki and Wellness, and you can find me there. Or you can also find it's the Radical Remission Project. They have list of teachers and coaches, and I'm listed as one of the cervical cancer survivor there. So people can reach out whenever they need to. And I provide coaching support to cancer patients, but not just cancer patients, anybody who wants to, alleviate their health symptoms, whether it's anxiety and depression or they have different issues. Like some people come to me for weight loss or like weight gain or like, insomnia or, stress reduction. I often teach people how to manage stress because that's one of the biggies, when it comes to alleviating EHS symptoms even, the more stressed you are, the weaker your body gets. So you are more affected by EMF than necessary, right? So like, yeah. So, and I have coached people with EHS too. And yeah, so looking at all the aspects is really important, including mental, emotional, spiritual. So,
I love that you have taken this very difficult situation. Nobody ever anticipates that they're going to get taken down by wireless radiation, and that you have figured it out, and now you've turned it around and you're helping others with all aspects of, as you said, mind, body, and spirit healing. So, Mana, thank you so much for being with us today, and we wish you much success in your current career. I also want to mention with regard to smart meters, here in Massachusetts, we have a bill that will be coming up in September for public hearing, and we will provide additional information out at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. If you go to our resources page, you will find the list of bills here in Massachusetts. And one way we can all help this situation is to send testimony in for these bills when they come up. Nobody deserves to have these smart meters mounted on their home at such great risk. So thank you to Senator Michael Moore for introducing that bill with an emergency preamble on it, and we'll hope to have more information on that in an upcoming segment. So thank you, everybody, and have a tech-safe day.